All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with returned Drew Dinsick, who is in an undisclosed location in the European night, hence the background. Drew, how was your weekend? How much of the NFL did you get to consume?
Not too much, but that's okay. I saw the important parts. It was a very interesting weekend. We are still really struggling to find our footing and get into sort of quality NFL football, it feels like. There are lots of whiffs of preseason quality in the air, I would say. I'm dying for offenses to start finding a little bit of rhythm, particularly those who have new coordinators and some of the young, new quarterbacks, outside of one that we're going to talk about here shortly. But it was overall a winning weekend for me. Although I got to tell you, man, totals are killing for me right now. And that's not actually that good of news because you get about a third of a stake on a total when I'm betting as I can on a side. And if I was basically able to kind of flat bet everything, I would be like just dancing in the street, excited about how the season's going so far. But I'm just barely getting my head above water every week because some of the sides I'm taking a bath. And my futures portfolio, I'm pretty much ready to write it all off as a loss. I don't think that any of like the really high, swing for the fences stuff that I thought was, even remotely realistic preseason has much of a chance right now. Although, we're 2 weeks into, 17 games of football. So a lot can change. But a lot of cold water thrown on the Jaguars after the result we saw. There's a handful of teams that I thought were going to be pretty competitive early on that just have no showed. So it's going to be a weird season, I guess. The idea that we kind of commented on last Monday, which was let's fast forward to Niners Cowboys NFC Championship, which may be the de facto Super Bowl. Last week we said let's fast forward to that championship. That feels crystallized now, and that may be the de facto Super Bowl based on what we're seeing from these AFC teams. Although, it's a long season, and I think a lot of these teams are trying to peak in January, not peak in September. So you got to kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah, I don't think any of these teams are juggernauts at the moment. Even San Francisco, I don't understand how their defense just randomly no-shows these games.
Yeah.
Think back to the Raiders game at the end of last year where Jarrett Stidham looked like Pete Dan Marino just moving the ball and the Raiders put up 34 points or whatever against them. Matthew Stafford did whatever he wanted against the Niners, and then they got lucky with a deflected interception off Kyren Williams' hands. And Brock Purdy, who overall has been good, he missed two wide open touchdowns yesterday.
He did.
He's not Patrick Mahomes, so he is beatable. And then the Cowboys, we'll get to Micah Parsons and some other aspects of the Cowboys, but Dak is still kind of Dak-ish, and his stats looked great yesterday, but he threw a pick six to Sauce Gardner that was right at 500 in real time, maybe even shorter than that to get taken to the house, and just went through Sauce's hands. He just made a meal of it. So, yeah, I don't think those teams are a total indestructible juggernauts, so they definitely look like the two best teams at the moment. And as far as your featured portfolio, what I would say to that is I think it was around this time last year when we were talking about Sauce Gardner 14-1 defensive year, Geno 80-1 comeback player. We're about 7 weeks away from the discussion that we had about Nick Bosa at 14-1 to win defensive player of the year, or 10-1 maybe. So there will be plenty of opportunities that pop up. And we might talk about one of them at the end of the show when we talk about MVP. But before that, we're going to hit some key injuries out of week 2 and some stock up, stock down. We're recording this before the Monday night games. So if Derek Carr goes down, we won't be able to cover it as we haven't seen it. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Let's start off with the Colts. Anthony Richardson knocked out in the first half against the Texans. He is in concussion protocol. Off of that, the Colts are 7.5-point dogs at the Ravens. The total is 44. Do you think that Richardson to Minshew is any difference at all?
I don't have a strong read about whether Minshew's ultimately going to go. Do you think that this is a guarantee that Richardson will not be cleared in time?
I just don't know that it really matters for the purpose of this game because Minshew looked fine against the Texans. His stats were excellent. He's one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league. He's not great, but Richardson, the passing stuff on Richardson hasn't been good so far, and he's been added a lot of value with his legs, which talked about with Vaughn yesterday. He didn't really do as much in college as you would expect, but he looked like a monster on the ground against Houston. Yeah. So I don't know. I would think that Minshew is the better passer. Obviously, Richardson far superior on the ground. So in terms of this game specifically, I don't think it really matters that much. Do you?
Okay, so I mean, I think it matters a little just because I think the upside for Richardson is like Colts could probably win. At which point I'm like more interested in the 300 money line than I am in plus 7.5. But I'm going to play Colts regardless. As soon as limits come up before we get the Wednesday injury information on the Colts, I think Colts are going to be in the account. The Ravens injuries and what they're dealing with right now is absurd. This team is going to trot out a marginally healthy squad at home against a Colts team that has a lot more just players than I realized when we handicapped them in the preseason. I don't think that they're realistically a bet on to win the AFC South, but I mean, the Jags were disappointing enough on Sunday that I'm now kind of rethinking exactly what their ceiling is in terms of that offense. So Colts plus 7.5, I think, is a bet. If you get surprise good news from Richardson, that's probably an equity in your pocket regardless, because that moves across 7. But your points are fair in that even with Minshew, I'm not like crying in my porridge on Sunday morning that I have 7.5 in pocket. I think the Colts are still alive.
Yep. Interesting that you would even have a bowl of porridge. That's another story. I think the sneaky thing with the Colts is that the past 2 years, their offensive line has been pretty terrible. And back particularly to the Andrew Luck year when the offensive line was just magnificent. Obviously, there's been some turnover since then, but the first 2 weeks, it's been really good. And it's never really made sense to me why it's been so bad, because they have – Quentin Nelson and Braden Smith and Ryan Kelly, like these are guys with pedigree. Bernard Ryman at left tackle is fine enough. Like they should be okay. And they have been so far, albeit against fairly anemic pass rushes against the Jags and the Texans. But I think the Colts are surprisingly competent around Richardson. Their secondary is no good. But the Ravens, like you said, just really banged up at the moment. And this kind of high-flying Todd Monken passing offense hasn't really surfaced yet. I think they're just one of the teams that is struggling with the adjustment and the growing pains to a new offense, new offensive coordinator, just like the Eagles are, and in a different kind of way, the way the Chiefs are. So I think they'll be fine eventually, but it's not great at the moment. Let's go to the Giants. Saquon Barkley suffered an ankle injury in the final minutes of a bizarre game against the Cardinals. Looks like he is going to be out, I would guess. I'm not sure that moves the needle a ton, given that they're playing the 49ers, who his defense didn't look magnificent against the Rams, but do have an excellent defense and an excellent rushing defense in particular. So does Saquon out really mean that much against San Francisco?
It's probably, and this is like a contrarian, this may sound like I'm being contrarian for contrarian's sake, but it's probably a positive for them. Saquon Barkley is boom or bust, and against the Niners defense, and particularly the way that they, the way that they cover the run, it's mostly bust. And if he is like specifically wasting downs, I think that handicaps the Giants in terms of being competitive in this game. I have heard, as same as you, Barkley not going to go. This is quick turnaround because it's Thursday nighter, and I mean, if the Giants defense had shown any signs of life against the Cardinals, I think they win and cover that game without really much of a sweat, which spooks me because you're right. There's not a lot of continuity. There's not a lot of fluidity, but the Niners offense has Kyle Shanahan. And that should be enough to really kind of absolutely, lampoon this Giants defense, particularly the way they want to cover, the way they want to pass rush. So I'm inclined to take the 10.5 points on a short week. I mean, the Niners realistically, like 2 road games, now you're home on a short week. Like, you want to turn this around. You just want to get in and get out, get a win. I don't think this is realistically like you pull out your best stuff unless Shanahan is like you and me and really, really, really angry that Brian Dable won Coach of the Year last year.
Yeah, I think with the Niners, I mean, the Niners played pretty poorly overall against the Rams, I think. And they played fairly poorly, and Brock Purdy missed 2 wide open touchdowns, and they still scored 30 and won by a touchdown.
Yeah.
The team is just spoiled in terms of talent offensively, so I don't really see how the Giants will keep up with or without Saquon. All right, before we get to stock up, stock down, it's an old-time AFC rivalry renewed on Sunday night, Drew, as TJ Watt and the Steelers travel to the desert to face Devontae Adams and the Raiders in Las Vegas. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. All right. Stock up, stock down. Stock up. Let's start with the Bucs, Baker Mayfield, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who were one of the 3 or 4 favorites to finish with the worst record. Not looking like that at the moment. They're plus 135 to make the playoffs. Incredibly, albeit they haven't faced a ton yet in the Vikings and the Bears, who might be 2 bottom 5 defenses. They're plus 400 to win the NFC South. 33 to 1 to win the NFC if you're a true believer. They're 6-point dogs home to the Eagles. Do you believe in this team?
I don't. If you want to stock up, them, and the market ought to have stocked up them, because they went in as the 4th choice in a bad division, and they have a lot of blue chip players, defense and offense. And yes, the quarterback is a guy that you can't trust with a 2-score lead. He's going to find his way out of it. You definitely can't trust him to come back from a deficit, which is, I think, really the nature of this particular handicap against the Eagles. And while we've seen their price shorten, and I get it, I agree with it. I think realistically the idea that the Eagles are shorter than a touchdown here is a little wild. The Buccaneers run a type of offense that is pretty aggressive with the blitz. They like to leave their corners on islands. That, to me, spells trouble against the likes of the Eagles, who have outstanding skill position players. I think that some of the issue, some of the perception of the Bucs is colored by exactly what you said, which is they have played 2 bad teams. Not the Vikings aren't bad, but their defense is quite bad. The Bears are bad. And I think having those 2 wins against the weak NFC North, congratulations. Like, you should win the games on your schedule that you're better than the other team, and they have more talent than those teams. And so good job getting those wins. But now this offensive line is going up against a unit that has legitimate pass rush threat and is going to be getting after Baker Mayfield all day long. This is kind of the least ideal matchup I could put on paper for the Buccaneers, and I think for those reasons, this is Eagles or pass. In terms of how to properly rate the Bucs going forward, if they are going up against a team that has a defense that has a mild to no pass rush, then the Bucs are going to score. If they are going up against a team where you have a young quarterback who is behind an inexperienced or bad offensive line, then they are going to wreck that guy's day. And I think that is exactly what you saw, last week against the Chicago Bears. And I think on the games in their schedule where they have those particular advantages, then you bet the Bucs. Otherwise, you stay way, way far away. So this is not a team that I expect to be in the playoff mix. I think the Falcons are a class above. Saints may be a class above, although I think the Saints they have a bunch of questions that they need to answer in terms of their offensive vision still. So, I'm not ready to fire on Bucs to win the South, but it's a bad division. The NFC is wide open. And if the Bucs, find their way into the playoffs, then we get to do what we maybe didn't think was ever possible again, which was bet against Baker Mayfield in a playoff game. So, that's kind of where my headspace is at.
Yeah, I think, look, with the Bucs, I think there's a very reasonable path for them to be an average NFL team and be a 8-9, maybe even 9-8 type of team. And if you want to believe in Baker Mayfield, you've talked about it in the past, but there are ways to kind of look at his career with a certain lens and say that he's the number 1 overall pick. He was excellent in years 1 and 3. There were mitigating circumstances in years 2, 4, and 5, and maybe he's just good-ish. And he's got 2 weapons in Evans and Godwin, who are the best weapons he's had, really, in his career. And there's still talent on the defense. There's still a lot of players on this team overall that, were part of a team that won the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. So I do think that the Eagles are a particularly bad matchup, just as you've got Jalen Carter going up against a very weak interior offensive line. And so I think we're just going to learn a lot about the Bucs. If they lose this game by 3 in a really competitive fashion, then I think you look at them as a team that could win a really weak division.
That's
to get blown out by 20. If they get blown out by 20, then perhaps not. Let's talk about the Jags, who have had an uneven start to the season. They did what was required in beating Indianapolis, so that game was dicey, and they had to cover at the death. And then really disappointing performance against the Chiefs. I think a lot of that was colored by the fact that they went 3 of 14 on 3rd and 4th down, and a lot of those were very narrow misses. Lawrence just missed weirdly in the end zones, a lot of almost plays. But this team just feels a little bit off at the moment. They don't really have much of a pass rush. I think the offense will be fine, and Lawrence is real, but this doesn't look like a Super Bowl contender at the moment. What's your read on Jacksonville, and do you think it's of any interest betting them at -120 to win the South?
I think it's value. I think they are still the class of this division, and I think there is room to improve this roster still. We know that for sure, with players returning from injury, with players returning from suspension, that the talent, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, which is already good, could get to great. And I think your points are fair in that there were some narrow misses. There was just a little bit of timing. And, Lawrence to Ridley is a new relationship. That's, they played at game speed now 2 weeks. And that should continue to mature as long as Calvin Ridley stays healthy. And so I'm still a very soft buy on the Jags as being in the mix in the AFC. I think Trevor Lawrence's ship is somewhat sailing for MVP consideration. I think Peterson's Coach of the Year ship is somewhat sailing. That was a big high leverage game against the Chiefs. And, if they came and showed you what their ceiling was in that game, then I think all of those things are on the table and we're having a very different discussion. But -120 is still a bet on. I'm not a realistic believer that the Titans are even the second best team, let alone should have the second highest odds in that division, despite a really compelling home win against the Chargers. I can't even tell you in that Chargers game, at what point I was sure the Chargers weren't somehow going to find a way to win. It really was how are they doing this? What is happening? How did they win the coin toss in overtime, and the play calling and the execution by Herbert was just so surprisingly poor in that first drive, and then right away the punt return sets the Titans up to just kind of play pretty conservative football and get a field goal and win it. And I don't think that's sustainable. And I think the Titans are still a team that could realistically win 7, 8, maybe even 9 games, but you're going to need double digits to beat the Jaguars, I think. And I still feel pretty strongly that the Jaguars match up specifically well against the Titans in terms of scoring into the 30s, because the Titans secondary is questionable, and at full strength, the Jaguars offensive line should be able to mitigate the incredibly talented defensive line that the Titans bring to the table.
Yeah, I think with the Titans Chargers game felt very much like a 9-8 team going up against an 8-9 team. It wasn't there were a lot of mistakes. It just didn't quite get there. I think the Jags do have some questions where the offensive line isn't great, the pass rush isn't great, but Lawrence is just so much better than any other quarterback in that division, and he's got better weapons than any other quarterback that you would expect that even if it is a little off kilter, that they should still find their way to 10-7 and winning the division. The Titans' offensive line, it just seems like it is unsalvageable with the pressure that Tannehill is under and the lack of room that Henry has to operate.
I would really like them to find themselves in the LA Rams inbox with an offer for Aaron Donald. I feel like that's kind of the key piece that would really kind of bring it all together. And then your questions about the team overall are all of a sudden, not really non-factors.
Well, I think the Rams might be good, or at least good-ish, and I'm not sure they want to move Aaron Donald now that they've got 2 Cooper Kupps when the original Cooper Kupp comes back in week 5. But speaking of the Rams and their opponent this week, they play the Bengals. Bengals opened as 6-point favorites last night. That's down to 1.5 as we're recording. No concrete update on Joe Burrow as of yet, though I think certainly the market expects that he's going to miss, and the market isn't always right, particularly given that limits are so low this time of week, and there have been some false alarms with this kind of stuff, particularly last year. I think back to the Justin Herbert Jags game, but to be fair, market was right with Jalen Hurts later in the year. So this is often calculated guesswork. What do you think the line closes if Burrow isn't a go?
Pick him. I think so the 6.5 that we were expecting was kind of on the heels of a team that was 3.5, 3.5 points better than the Ravens. I guess it was 3 on the close. But the proof is in the results to this point that they rushed Burrow back too quickly. I don't really know. I mean, I understand why. Like, your first 2 games are divisional, games that are going to determine whether or not you have home field in the AFC playoff picture. That matters. So you push Burrow out there when he's not ready, and the result is he re-injures his calf. This is not like organizational malpractice, like I would say other teams certainly have executed in the face of, quarterback injuries. And I don't have the inside information here. The Bengals have been very cagey, and in general, teams have been very diligent about not really, leaking injury information to the betting space, which is, I think, a good thing for everyone. But I don't have word that he will not play. I think that the market was so quick to downgrade the Bengals, not just because of the risk of Burrow not playing, but because of the way he has played when on the field, on top, on top of the potential for him not going. Does that make sense? I think the mechanics that you're seeing from him are not what you expect from Joe Burrow. And if he is not mechanically solid, if he's not able to push into his throw, then he kind of doesn't have an especially strong or impressive arm, and his accuracy all of a sudden is an issue. So, I think there are red flags, warning flags all over the place here. And if Burrow forces his way onto the field, because it seems like that's sort of his MO, then I think we're talking about the same sort of situation with Justin Herbert in week 3 last year, where he just was not ready to play, not capable of running the offense to the degree that they were ultimately, the skill would dictate how they should be rated. So, yeah, for me, the move is fair. For me, the move across 3 is probably one of the biggest moves we're going to see early in the week all season long. And I think it's fair, because whether or not he goes, he is not right. And the idea that 1 week of practice, 1 week of therapy, 1 week of anything is going to all of a sudden get him back into the form you saw from him at the end of last season is kind of nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly wasn't right the first 2 games. I think he had a 5.4 yard average depth of target against the Ravens, who were banged up in the secondary, and the Bengals famously have eviscerated the Ravens secondary with Chase and Burrow. So, yeah, he didn't look right. It was also just the no doctor, but the injury mechanism didn't look fantastic either, as he kind of pulled up after an acute action limping. So the problem is that if he doesn't go against the Rams, who I think are decent, and then the next week is at the Titans, where the Bengals will be a dog without Burrow. If he misses a week or two, season might just be over at that point. So he might have to, he may just have to go out there and chance it. But certainly the market is leaning towards him not doing that at the moment, or doing so in a very compromised state. So we'll track how that unfolds. All right, before we get to a market that Joe Burrow featured in prominently once upon a time, the MVP market. Reminder that Bet the Edge isn't the only show every weekday during the NFL season. You can also check out the Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, Connor Rogers, and myself. It airs live on Peacock at noon Eastern and re-airs at 4 p.m. It's available on our NFL on NBC Sports YouTube channel, as well as wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Jay, I got to ask you, what's the temperature in the fantasy community about the Bengals offense right now?
It's not great. T. Higgins had a good game, but there'll be a lot of fantasy managers with Jamar Chase who are headed to the exits already, and Joe Burrow. But it's all right. I'm sure Jake Browning will be fantastic, and everything will be as it were. Jake Browning's not going to win MVP, but Tua Tagovailoa might. He is the favorite right now at plus 550. Patrick Mahomes is plus 650. And then we got Allen, Hurts, Lawrence, Jackson. And that concludes the list of front runners for now. I think what you said about Lawrence MVP before is pertinent, but his chances, they took a hit, and it was kind of a double hit because he had a chance to not kill off Patrick Mahomes in this market, but put a serious dent in Mahomes, who that offense doesn't look right at all at the moment. And I believe that the first two games of this season, in terms of offensive success rate, rank as two of the bottom 5 games in Patrick Mahomes' career, which just goes to show you that, one, I think it outlines the absence of Travis Kelce in week 1 and the fact that he's probably not 100% at the moment either. But the Jags game in particular, that was the lowest success rate on offense that Mahomes has ever had in his career. And it's not like 96 out of 96. And it's not like he's going up against the Cowboys defense. He's going up against the Lions and Jags defenses, which are not impenetrable. So I think that's a reflection on the fact that I think he had 11 players catch a pass on Sunday, and his leader in yards was Sky Moore, who didn't catch a pass in week 1, relying on Kadarius Toney and his inconsistency, Rashee Rice, Justin Watson, just random guys. And I think that is materially impacting the MVP market. But who do you think should be favored at the moment?
I mean, I guess through 2 weeks, Tua is your MVP, which is why he's the favorite in the market. If you told me before the season started that 2 weeks into this year, Tua will be the MVP favorite, I wouldn't have been like, no, what? But I would be like, so something happened to all the good quarterbacks? And that's kind of where we are. Like, to this point in the season, like, to me, it's less about Tua being 2-0. And granted, like, two wins against, like, bona fides. Like, Patriots aren't going to, they weren't contending for a Super Bowl, but he beat them. Chargers were perceived as Super Bowl contenders. He beat them. He's got Mike McDaniel pulling the strings. McDaniel is in his bag right now. He is calling amazing stuff. And I think that as long as they have, healthy Tua on the field, as long as Tyreek Hill is available, because he's sort of the X factor for Tua, even more than Waddle. I mean, I know Waddle's dealing with some injuries, and he had a better game from a statistical standpoint on Sunday. But Hill is kind of the guy that unlocks that offense, I think. And so, as long as Hill is right and on the field, and McDaniel is scripting this incredible offense, Tua is going to continue to put up statistical performances that warrants consideration for him. But I cannot get over the fact that my likelihood that he starts 17 games is low. And I'm not saying low like I don't think it's possible. I'm saying low like relative to the other guys who are in the conversation. And if the other guys in the conversation are getting their stinkers out early in the season, then they are going to come back and they are going to be factors later. I put Burrow in a separate category because I think there is a huge slice of the distribution where Burrow ultimately does not finish this season. But I think the guys that you would consider other, realistic top of the pile here, namely Allen, Mahomes, and Hurts, are, they're going to have better games in the middle and towards the end of the season than they have had through weeks 1 and week 2. And it's not how you start, it's how you finish. So I basically just want to be a bet against Tua right now at 2-0. And I guess the only other kind of color I can add to this is there were 2 road games. So he has a lot of home games left. And if ultimately they can kind of eke out wins and he can stay healthy, then he'll be, a top 3 vote getter, I would guess, at the end of the year, even if he doesn't, if he doesn't actually win. But I'm not criticizing his performance. I'm not saying this is unsustainable. I just think that the risk of injury is an injury in a sense that he misses not just 1 week, but multiple weeks, and or gets injured in game, they leave him in, and he performs poorly to the tune of people kind of, he loses his luster. I think those are real outcomes. And I think for those reasons, I'm not ever going to have a Tua ticket. And if he ultimately wins the MVP, congrats to him, congrats to Dolphins fans, congrats to that organization, because, they will have had all of the success they wanted this year, but it's going to be without me.
Yeah, I think there are better ways to bet on Tua MVP if you think that he's going to have that type of season. Like Mike McDaniel, Coach of the Year, Tyreek Hill, Offensive Player of the Year, are hugely correlated with Tua winning MVP, and those guys will get credit. And Tua winning MVP wouldn't preclude either of those guys winning those awards. So I think Tua is an interesting one. I would still have Mahomes the favorite in the market. I think they're more of a chance to get the 1 seed. Mahomes is just better because he's the best quarterback, and he hasn't really reflected in the stats yet, but he's been magnificent the first 2 weeks. He hasn't gotten worse or anything. He's still Patrick Mahomes, and I think his weapons will get better. So Mahomes would still be the favorite for me. I think there's a bit of value at plus 650 on Mahomes. I would have Tua as the second favorite. He's gotten better as well. He's not the guy that he was last year, and I think about the contrast in how he played against the Chargers last year versus how he played against them last week. He's just making better throws. It's year 2 in McDaniel's system. And then I think the idea that he's an injury risk, and he is more so than I would say Mahomes or Allen, but it's a weird one because he got concussed twice last year, and I'm not sure, every quarterback is at the risk of getting concussed. It's just with Tua, if he gets concussed, he might be done for the year. Whereas if Mahomes gets concussed, he's probably back in a week. So that is one small thing, but the risk of any given quarterback getting concussed in a season is not a likelihood. It's a possibility, but it's not greater than 50% or anything like that. So the most likely outcome, I think, is that Tua just doesn't get concussed this season, and it's fine. It is, a regular MVP candidate who stays relatively healthy. So I think he should be the second favorite. All these other guys, Jalen Hurts, Hurts just doesn't look right. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the new offense. He threw an awful pick against the Vikings, where if 25 didn't catch the ball, then 24 would. Allen was great against the Raiders, but it was the Raiders. He's got a harder schedule coming up. Lawrence I don't like. Lamar don't like at the moment. To wrap up, Drew, I'll throw one at you from left field. You'll like this one. Or maybe you won't, but you'll like it in 3 hours. Micah Parsons is 100 to 1 to win MVP, and I think he can do it. I don't think it's massive value at 100 to 1, but I think he should be shorter, because here's the quick bite-sized case. J.J. Watt in 2014 got 13 out of 50 votes and finished second to an excellent Aaron Rodgers season. And
really?
Presumably would have won if Rodgers didn't have that type of season. And that was on a 9-7 Texans team. And Watt got 20.5 sacks. I think if Parsons gets 20-plus sacks on the Cowboys team that has the best record, and you end up with an uninspiring quarterback class, I think he can win. But what do you think?
I do. I like this immediately. That could take me 3 hours. Okay. I don't know if it's possible. I really don't. I can tell you though. Surely that to this point in the season, he's been the most fun player to watch. And through 2 weeks, I know things are going to change, but through 2 weeks, defense has been the story. Right. This has been a season so far that is, that the defenses are showing out, and he is the best defensive player. And I think we'll continue to get those, kind of accolades and the high profile exposure that comes along with being a Cowboy. I would love to see it. And I like you made the joke about Dak kind of, some of his questions, some of the Cowboys offense being. I kind of don't even really care when the Cowboys offense is stuck in mud, because that just means the defense is coming back out. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, punt it. Like, let's get the good guys back out there. That's kind of the nature of watching a Cowboys game right now, and I think that speaks to the excitement around a player like Parsons, who's just at the peak of his entering the peak of his powers, and just an absolute game wrecker. So I don't know that this is high likelihood, but 100 to 1, certainly a fun bet to have in pocket. And as long as the Cowboys are winning because of their defense, then this is a snowball rolling downhill.
Yeah, I think it should be more like 50 to 1. I don't think it's very likely. 100 to 1. There's the meat on the bone. And also, I think the more relevant thing perhaps is that I just don't think Dak is going to win MVP when everyone thinks
no chance
is the best player on that team. It's like
yes,
it's like a Cooper Kupp blocking Matthew Stafford in 2021 type of thing, where no one thought Stafford was the best player. Everyone thought it was Kupp. And Stafford didn't end up having a real case anyway, but he wasn't going to win with Kupp on his team. And likewise, unless Dak gets a lot better, everyone's going to think Parsons is the best player and their candidate. So, I don't like Dak in this market. I do like Micah at 100 to 1. News also just broke that Saquon is expected to miss 3 weeks. Per Adam
3?
Schefter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which, I don't know if it moves the needle a ton, but yeah, that's not great news for the New York Giants, who feels like their season is over, but they've got the same record as the Chiefs and the Bills somehow. So maybe with Daboll's genius, they can figure it out, but I don't think that team's going to be making the playoffs. All right, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those of you watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. And also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you tomorrow.